She sat across from me in my office, her hands shaking as she held a collection letter. Her voice was barely audible. I don't understand. They're saying I owe $105,000. But I never borrowed any money. I never signed anything. How can this be happening? That's how it started. With confusion. With fear. With a woman whose entire financial life was being destroyed by someone she trusted. Let me take you back to the beginning of this case. I'm a civil litigation attorney specializing in fraud and forgery cases. I've been practicing law for 17 years, mostly in New York City, and I've seen every kind of financial deception you can imagine. But this case stands out. Because the perpetrator wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some identity thief operating from overseas. It was family. Ella Martinez was 34 years old when she first walked into my office. She was a freelance graphic designer, soft-spoken, hard-working, living a modest but comfortable life in Queens with her husband Jason. Everything about Ella said ordinary person. Jeans and a simple sweater. No expensive jewelry. No designer bags. Just someone trying to live a quiet life and do good work. Which made what happened to her even more shocking. Ella had been married to Jason for 6 years. Good marriage. They were partners in the truest sense. They split bills fairly. They supported each other's careers. They were saving slowly to buy a house. Jason's mother was a woman named Sylvia Martinez, and Sylvia was the complete opposite of her son and daughter-in-law. Sylvia was what you might call a society woman. She lived for appearances. She wore designer clothes she probably couldn't afford. She drove a Mercedes. She threw elaborate parties. She belonged to exclusive clubs. She bragged constantly about her success and status. At the center of Sylvia's carefully constructed image was her antique shop in Manhattan. A beautiful boutique called Martinez Fine Antiques, filled with expensive furniture, art, jewelry, and collectibles from around the world. Sylvia loved to talk about her shop. At every family gathering, every social event, she would dominate conversations with stories about her business success, her wealthy clients, her impeccable taste. And for the past 3 years, Sylvia had been telling everyone the same thing about Ella. My daughter-in-law Ella is my business partner. She's absolutely integral to everything I do. We run the shop together. The first time Sylvia made this claim, Ella was standing right there at a family dinner. She looked confused. I'm not your business partner, Sylvia. Sylvia waved her hand dismissively. Oh, don't be so modest. You designed all my branding. The logo, the business cards, the website. You're part of the business. It was technically true that Ella had done some graphic design work for the antique shop. Once. 3 years ago. As a favor to her mother-in-law. She'd spent maybe 2 days creating a logo and some basic marketing materials. She'd never been paid. She'd certainly never been involved in the actual business operations. But Sylvia kept repeating the claim. At parties, at family events, to friends and acquaintances. Ella and I are business partners. My daughter-in-law helps me run the shop. I couldn't do any of this without Ella. Ella found it annoying and embarrassing, but ultimately harmless. Why make a big deal about it? It seemed to make Sylvia happy to exaggerate, and it wasn't hurting anyone. Or so Ella thought. Until 6 months ago, when the first collection letter arrived. Ella opened her mailbox one afternoon and found an envelope from a debt collection agency. She assumed it was junk mail or a mistake. She almost threw it away without opening it. Thank God she didn't. The letter stated that Ella was 90 days past due on loan payments. The outstanding balance? $105,000. If full payment wasn't received within 15 days, the agency would pursue legal action, including wage garnishment and asset seizure. Ella stared at the letter in complete confusion. She'd never taken out a loan for $105,000. She didn't have any business loans. This had to be some kind of error. She called the collection agency immediately. There's been a mistake. I never took out this loan. Ma'am, according to our records, you co-signed on a business loan for Martinez Fine Antiques 3 years ago. The business has defaulted on payments, and as co-signer, you're legally responsible for the full outstanding balance. I never co-signed anything. I don't have anything to do with that business. Ma'am, we have documentation showing your signature on the loan application. Would you like us to email you copies? Yes. Send me everything you have. That evening, Ella received an email with attached PDF files. Loan application documents dated 3 years earlier. Documents for a business loan from Metropolitan Bank in Manhattan. Documents requesting $105,000 in financing for Martinez Fine Antiques. And there, on multiple pages, was Ella's signature. Except Ella had never signed these documents. She'd never even seen them before. The signature looked like hers. It was close. Very close. But Ella knew her own signature, and while this was similar, it wasn't quite right. Someone had forged her signature to take out a $105,000 business loan. And Ella had a sinking feeling she knew exactly who that someone was. Over the next 2 weeks, more letters arrived, from different collection agencies, from credit card companies, all claiming Ella owed money on accounts she'd never opened. In total, Ella discovered she was supposedly responsible for $137,000 in debt, $105,000 in business loans, $32,000 in maxed-out business credit cards. Her credit score, which had been excellent, had plummeted. She was marked as delinquent on multiple accounts. She was facing legal action from multiple creditors. Ella's entire financial life was collapsing, and she had no idea how it had happened. She tried calling Sylvia. No answer. She tried texting. No response. She tried going to the antique shop. Sylvia wasn't there, and the employee said she didn't know when Sylvia would be back. Finally, Ella showed up at Sylvia's apartment unannounced. She rang the doorbell repeatedly until Sylvia answered. Ella? What are you doing here? We need to talk, right now. Sylvia looked irritated. This isn't a good time. I don't care. Did you take out loans in my name? Sylvia's expression didn't change. I have no idea what you're talking about. Ella pulled out the loan documents and shoved them at Sylvia. These. Business loans with my signature on them, except I never signed them. You did, didn't you? Sylvia barely glanced at the papers. That's ridiculous. Why would I do that? Because you needed a cosigner and you knew I'd never agree, so you forged my signature. You're being hysterical. I think you should leave. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. Sylvia's voice turned cold. The truth is, you're making wild accusations. Yes, the business has some financing. Yes, you're listed on some documents. But you knew about this. You're my business partner. You just don't remember signing because it was 3 years ago. I am not your business partner. I never have been, and I never signed anything. Your signature says otherwise. Now get out of my apartment before I call the police. Ella left, shaking with rage and fear. Sylvia was lying. Ella knew she was lying, but how could she prove it? That's when Ella came to see me. She walked into my office carrying a folder stuffed with documents. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red from crying. She sat down and just started talking, the words tumbling out in a rush. I listened to the entire story. When she finished, I asked to see all the documentation she had. I spent nearly an hour reviewing everything: the loan applications, the credit card agreements, the collection notices, the copies of signatures. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. This was systematic identity theft and forgery. Someone had used Ella's personal information to secure business financing. They'd provided copies of her driver's license and social security card to the banks. They'd practiced her signature until they could replicate it convincingly enough to fool bank employees. This wasn't a random identity thief. This was someone with intimate access to Ella's personal documents. Someone who knew her well. Someone who could study her signature. Ella, I need to ask you something important. Does Sylvia have access to your apartment? Ella looked confused by the question. Yes, she has a spare key. She watches our cat sometimes when Jason and I travel. So she's been in your home, alone, multiple times over the past few years. Yes. Oh my God. The realization was dawning on Ella's face. She could have gone through my documents. Exactly. Driver's license, social security card, bank statements, anything with your signature on it. She had access to everything she'd need. But why? Why would she do this to me? Because her business is failing. She needed financing. She couldn't qualify for loans on her own. And she knew you'd never agree to co-sign. So she forged your signature. Ella looked sick. But she's family. She's Jason's mother. How could she do this? It was a question I'd heard many times before in cases like this. How could family betray family? The answer was always the same. Desperation, greed, or both. Ella, we need to file a police report immediately. This is identity theft and forgery. These are serious crimes. What will happen to Sylvia if we report her? If we can prove she did this, she'll face criminal charges. She could go to prison. What about Jason? This will destroy him. She's his mother. I understand this is complicated, but what's your alternative? Let her saddle you with $137,000 in debt you didn't incur? Let her destroy your credit and your financial future? Ella started crying. I don't know what to do. I gave her some time. Then I laid out her options clearly. Here's the reality. You have two choices. Option 1. You pursue this legally. Police report, lawsuit, criminal charges. We force the creditors to remove this debt from your name. But it will likely destroy your relationship with Sylvia and could strain your marriage. What's option 2? Option 2. You try to confront Sylvia with evidence and force her to take responsibility privately. Maybe she agrees to refinance everything in her own name. But honestly, people who commit fraud rarely admit it voluntarily. Can I think about it? You can, but don't take too long. The creditors are already threatening legal action. Your credit is being destroyed every day this continues. Ella left my office that day without making a decision. But 3 days later, she called me back. I want to fight this. I want to file the police report and pursue legal action. Jason supports me. He's furious at his mother. Good. That's the right decision. Let's get started. We filed a police report that same day. Ella gave a detailed statement to a detective specializing in identity theft and fraud cases. Then I started building our case. First, I hired a forensic handwriting analyst. Dr. Patricia Chen was one of the best in the field, frequently called as an expert witness in forgery cases. I sent her copies of the signatures on the loan documents, along with verified samples of Ella's real signature, from her driver's license, passport, and other official documents. Dr. Chen's analysis took 2 weeks. When she called me with her findings, I knew we had a strong case. The signatures are definitely forgeries, Dr. Chen told me. They're good forgeries. Whoever did this spent time practicing. But there are consistent differences in letter formation, pen pressure, and natural flow. These signatures were carefully copied, but they're not authentic. How confident are you in this assessment? Confident enough to testify under oath in court. I've analyzed hundreds of forgery cases. These are forged signatures, no question. Next, I needed to prove Ella couldn't have been at the bank when the documents were signed. I pulled Ella's work records for the dates in question. On the day the loan documents were allegedly signed, Ella had been at work all day. I had time-stamped computer login records. I had testimony from her employer confirming she was in the office. I had security camera footage from her workplace. Ella had been 15 miles away from the Manhattan Bank when someone claiming to be her signed those documents. Then I did something that would prove crucial. I started investigating Sylvia's business finances. What I discovered was shocking. Martinez Fine Antiques was drowning in debt. The business was barely staying afloat. Revenue had been declining for years. The shop was bleeding money. But there was something else, something that would become the key to our entire case. I pulled the business registration documents, and I discovered that Sylvia Martinez was not actually the owner of Martinez Fine Antiques. The owner of record was Roberto Martinez, Sylvia's brother, who lived in Spain. Sylvia was listed merely as the manager. This changed everything. Sylvia had taken out business loans for a company she didn't even own. She'd forged her daughter-in-law's signature to secure financing for her brother's business, without his knowledge or permission. This wasn't just identity theft and forgery. This was potentially embezzlement, too. I reached out to Roberto Martinez through the contact information on the business registration. It took a few days to connect with him in Spain. "Mr. Martinez, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm an attorney in New York. I'm calling about Martinez Fine Antiques." "Yes? Is something wrong?" "I'm representing someone who's discovered that business loans were taken out in her name without her knowledge or consent. Loans for your antique shop." There was a long pause. "I don't know anything about any loans. You're listed as the owner of the business. Are you saying you didn't authorize these loans?" "I had no idea there were any loans. Sylvia manages the day-to-day operations. She sends me quarterly financial reports. She's never mentioned any loans." "Mr. Martinez, I think you need to know something. Your business currently has over $100,000 in outstanding loan debt, and I believe your sister took out these loans without your knowledge." Another long pause. "That's not possible." "I'm afraid it is, and there may be other financial irregularities. I think you should consider having the business books audited." I need to think about this. Can you send me documentation?" "Absolutely." I sent Roberto everything I had: copies of the loan documents, evidence of the forgery, an overview of the business's debt. 3 days later, Roberto called me back. His voice was tight with anger. "I've reviewed what you sent. I'm coming to New York. We need to meet." 2 weeks later, Roberto Martinez flew from Spain to New York. We met in my office along with Ella. Roberto was in his early 60s, distinguished looking with silver hair and expensive but conservative clothes. He had the bearing of someone successful and serious. "Thank you for contacting me," he told me. "I had no idea any of this was happening." "Your sister never mentioned the loans?" "Never. Her quarterly reports show the business as modestly profitable. There's no mention of debt. No mention of loans. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I think your sister has been lying to you about the business finances." Roberto looked pained. "My father left me that business when he died 10 years ago. I was already living in Spain. Sylvia needed work. She'd always loved antiques. I thought it would be perfect. I trusted her completely." He looked at Ella. "I'm so sorry for what she's done to you. Using your name, forging your signature, it's unconscionable." "Did you know she was telling everyone I was her business partner?" Ella asked. "She mentioned you a few times, said you'd helped with marketing, but she never said you were a partner. She's been claiming that for 3 years." Roberto shook his head. "I'm hiring a forensic accountant to audit the business. I need to know exactly what's been happening." "That's wise," I said, "because I suspect the loans are just the beginning." Roberto's forensic audit took 6 weeks. What it revealed was devastating. Sylvia hadn't just taken out unauthorized loans. She'd been systematically embezzling from the business for at least 4 years. She would sell expensive antiques, but only report half the sale price in the books. She'd pocket the difference. She'd create fake expenses for inventory that never existed. She'd use the business credit card for personal purchases. Over 4 years, She'd stolen approximately $95,000 from her brother's business. And the business loans? They weren't for expansion or inventory. They were to cover up the embezzlement. She'd stolen so much cash and inventory that the books weren't balancing. The loan money was used to replace what she'd taken, creating a shell game to hide her crimes. When Roberto called me with these findings, he sounded broken. My own sister. I gave her an opportunity. I paid her well. I trusted her. And she's been stealing from me for years. I'm sorry, Roberto. What should I do?
Press charges against my own sister? That's your decision. But you should know that if you don't, she'll probably never face real consequences.
Let me think about it. A week later, Roberto decided. He was pressing charges. Embezzlement, fraud, and theft. Combined with Ella's case for identity theft and forgery, Sylvia Martinez was looking at multiple felony charges. But before we went to prosecutors, I decided to try one more thing. I scheduled a meeting. Me, Ella, and Sylvia. I told Sylvia's attorney we had new evidence and wanted to discuss settlement possibilities. The meeting was in a conference room. Sylvia arrived wearing one of her expensive outfits, her hair and makeup perfect. She looked confident. That confidence wouldn't last long. I laid out all the evidence on the table, the forged loan documents, the handwriting analysis, the timeline proving Ella was elsewhere when the signatures occurred, the embezzlement evidence from the audit. Ms. Martinez, we know everything. You forged Ella's signature to take out business loans. You've been embezzling from your brother's business. You've been lying to everyone for years. Sylvia's face remained carefully neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Then let me make this very clear. You have two options. Option 1, you admit everything. Refinance the loans in your own name, pay restitution, and we consider not pursuing criminal charges. Option 2, we go to court, we present all this evidence, and you go to prison. You can't prove anything. I pulled out one more document, the piece of evidence I'd been saving. You've been claiming Ella is your business partner for 3 years. Do you know why? Sylvia said nothing. Because you were creating a scapegoat. If the business failed, if the debts came due, you could blame it all on Ella, the business partner who mismanaged everything. That was your plan, wasn't it? I could see recognition flicker in Sylvia's eyes.
But here's what you didn't know. I contacted Roberto. We've audited the books. We know about the embezzlement. And Roberto is ready to press charges. Sylvia's confident mask finally cracked, just slightly. I also have testimony from bank employees who met with Ella Martinez to sign documents. Their descriptions don't match Ella. They match you. We have security footage from one of the banks. Would you like to see it? I pulled out a still image from bank security camera. A woman who looked very much like Sylvia, wearing sunglasses and a hat, but clearly not Ella. Sylvia stared at the image. The color drained from her face. So here we are, Ms. Martinez. You're caught. The question is whether you're going to accept responsibility or force us to destroy you in court. Sylvia's attorney whispered something to her. She shook her head. Then finally, quietly, she spoke. What do you want? And that's when I knew we'd won. After Sylvia asked, "What do you want?"
the room fell silent. Her attorney looked uncomfortable. Ella stared at her mother-in-law with an expression somewhere between anger and disbelief. I pulled out a document I'd prepared in advance, a settlement agreement. Here's what's going to happen, I said. First, you're going to refinance every single loan currently in Ella's name. You'll put them entirely in your own name. No more co-signers, no more connections to Ella whatsoever. Sylvia's attorney jumped in. My client may not qualify for that amount of financing on her own. Then she'll have to sell assets, her car, her jewelry, her home if necessary. The loans get removed from Ella's name completely within 60 days. That's non-negotiable. What else? The attorney asked. Second, Sylvia will sign affidavits admitting she forged Ella's signature. These affidavits will be sent to every creditor, every credit bureau, and every collection agency. Ella's credit will be completely cleared. That's an admission of criminal activity, the attorney protested. Yes, it is. Which brings me to point 3. If Sylvia complies with every term of this agreement, Ella will not press criminal charges. The police report stays on file, but we won't pursue prosecution. And if she doesn't comply? Then we proceed with criminal charges: identity theft, forgery, fraud. She'll go to prison. And before you object, let me be clear about something else. I looked directly at Sylvia. Your brother, Roberto, is pursuing the embezzlement charges separately. That's not part of this settlement. His case proceeds regardless of what happens here. So you're already facing criminal exposure. This agreement only addresses Ella's claims. Sylvia finally spoke. Her voice was barely audible. How am I supposed to refinance loans I can't qualify for? That's your problem to solve. Sell your car, sell your jewelry, take out a loan against your home. I don't care how you do it.
But you will do it. This will financially ruin me. You ruined yourself, I said coldly. This is just the consequences.
Sylvia's attorney asked for time to discuss with his client. We took a 15-minute break. When we returned, Sylvia looked defeated. I'll sign, she said quietly. There's one more condition, I added. You will have no contact with Ella for a minimum of 2 years. No calls, no texts, no showing up at family events where she's present. If you violate this, the criminal charges proceed immediately. What about my son? I'm not allowed to see Jason? That's between you and Jason. But any contact happens without Ella present. She deserves peace and space to recover from what you've done to her. Sylvia signed the settlement agreement that day, but signing it was only the beginning. Over the next 2 months, I monitored Sylvia's compliance carefully, and she tried everything to wiggle out of her obligations. First, she claimed she couldn't get approved for the loan refinancing. Her attorney sent me letters saying the demands were impossible to meet. I responded with a simple message: comply or face criminal charges. Then Sylvia tried to delay. She said she needed more time to sell assets, that the real estate market was slow, that jewelry wasn't worth what she thought. I gave her a 2-week extension. That was it. Finally, under the pressure of impending criminal charges, Sylvia started selling things. Her Mercedes went first. She got $65,000 for it. That money went toward paying down the loan principal. Her jewelry collection was next. Auction houses, estate sales, private buyers. She liquidated everything. Another $30,000. Then she put her Brooklyn brownstone on the market. It was a beautiful property in an expensive neighborhood. She'd bought it years ago for $700,000. It was now worth about $1.1 million. The house sold in 3 weeks. After paying off her mortgage, she walked away with about $400,000 in equity. That money, combined with the car and jewelry sales, allowed her to pay off most of Ella's fraudulent debt entirely. What remained, she refinanced in her own name only. 60 days after signing the settlement, every dollar of debt was removed from Ella's name. But while we were handling Ella's case, Roberto's criminal case against Sylvia was moving forward. The district attorney reviewed the forensic audit evidence. They saw clear proof of embezzlement over multiple years. They charged Sylvia with theft, fraud, and embezzlement. If convicted, she faced up to 8 years in prison. Sylvia's attorney tried to negotiate, offered restitution in exchange for reduced charges. But the DA wasn't interested in going easy. Your client stole from her own brother for years, the prosecutor told Sylvia's attorney. She used those stolen funds to maintain a lavish lifestyle. She showed sophistication and planning. This isn't a one-time mistake. This is systematic criminal behavior. The case went to trial 6 months after Sylvia signed our settlement agreement. I attended the trial as a witness. So did Ella, Roberto, the forensic accountant, and several antique shop employees who testified about suspicious activities they'd witnessed. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically: sales records that didn't match inventory, cash transactions that disappeared, fake vendor invoices for supplies that never arrived, personal expenses charged to the business credit card, and the centerpiece: bank records showing Sylvia had deposited over $95,000 in unexplained cash into her personal accounts over 4 years. Money that had gone missing from the antique shop. Sylvia's defense was weak. Her attorney tried to argue the accounting was sloppy but not criminal, that there were innocent explanations for the discrepancies. The jury didn't buy it. After 3 days of testimony and only 4 hours of deliberation, they returned a guilty verdict on all counts. Sylvia's face crumpled when she heard the verdict. The confident society woman was gone. This was just someone facing the reality of what she'd done. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was packed. Jason attended, though he sat in the back. Ella sat in the front row with Roberto. Friends and family filled the other seats. The judge asked if anyone wanted to make victim impact statements. Ella stood first. "Your Honor, Sylvia Martinez didn't just forge my signature and steal my identity. She tried to destroy my entire financial life. My credit was ruined. I was facing lawsuits. I couldn't sleep. I had panic attacks. I was terrified of losing everything." Ella's voice was steady but emotional. But what hurt most was the betrayal. Sylvia was family. I welcomed her into my life. I trusted her. And she used that trust to commit crimes against me. She spent 3 years telling everyone I was her business partner, not out of pride, but to create a scapegoat. If her schemes failed, she could blame me. She looked at Sylvia. "You've destroyed your relationship with your son. Jason barely speaks to you now. Was maintaining your fake society lifestyle worth losing your family?" Roberto spoke next. "Sylvia is my little sister. I love her. I gave her an opportunity when she needed one. I trusted her with our father's legacy, and she betrayed that trust completely. She stole from me for years while looking me in the eye and lying." His voice was heavy with disappointment. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for accountability. What Sylvia did was criminal, and I need this court to send a message that family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior." Several other witnesses spoke. Employees from the antique shop who felt betrayed. Friends who'd been lied to. People whose trust had been violated. Finally, the judge asked Sylvia if she wanted to speak. She stood slowly. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. "I have no excuses for what I've done. I made terrible choices. I hurt people I love. I stole from my brother. I destroyed my daughter-in-law's credit and put her at risk." Her voice cracked. "I was obsessed with appearances, with being seen as successful, with having status and respect. I lost sight of what actually matters: integrity, honesty, family." She looked at Ella and Jason. "I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough, but I am truly, deeply sorry for everything." The judge listened impassively. Then he spoke. "Ms. Martinez, you've committed serious crimes over an extended period of time. You showed sophistication in your methods. You showed callousness toward your victims. You betrayed your own family members for personal gain." He paused. "However, you've accepted responsibility. You've made substantial restitution. You've cooperated with the investigation. Taking all of that into account, I'm sentencing you to 4 years in federal prison. You'll also be required to pay full restitution to your brother for the remaining embezzled funds. Upon release, You'll serve 3 years of supervised probation. 4 years. Sylvia would serve at least 3 with good behavior. As she was led away in handcuffs, she looked at Jason one last time. He turned away. Outside the courthouse, Ella felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, exhaustion. "It's finally over," she said. "The legal part is over," I corrected gently. "The emotional part will take longer." "I know, but at least now I can start moving forward." Over the next year, Ella focused on rebuilding her life. Her credit was fully restored. Her freelance business grew. She and Jason bought a small house in New Jersey. They had difficult conversations about Sylvia, about whether to maintain any contact while she served her sentence. "She's my mother," Jason said, "but she's also a criminal who tried to destroy you. You don't have to choose between us," Ella said. "Whatever relationship you want with her is your choice. I just need boundaries. I don't know what I want. I'm so angry at her, but she's still my mom. You don't have to decide today or this year. Take your time." Jason appreciated that. He didn't visit Sylvia in prison. He didn't write letters. He needed space and time to process everything. Meanwhile, Roberto closed the antique shop. He sold the inventory, sold the lease on the space, and liquidated everything. "I can't look at it anymore without thinking about what she did," he told me. "Better to close it and move on." But Roberto did one more thing that surprised everyone. He called me about 18 months after Sylvia went to prison. "I've been thinking about Ella and Jason, about what they went through. I know I paid off the fraudulent debt, but that doesn't compensate for the emotional trauma, the stress, the damage to their lives. What are you thinking? I want to give them money, compensation for what they suffered." "That's very generous, but you're not legally obligated." "I know, but it's the right thing to do. My sister caused this harm. I feel some responsibility to make it right." Roberto ended up giving Ella and Jason $50,000, enough to make a real difference in their lives, enough to accelerate their house plans and provide financial security. Ella was overwhelmed when she received the check. "He didn't have to do this," she said. "No, he didn't, but he wanted to. Some people believe in doing the right thing even when they're not required to." "I don't know what to say." "Say thank you, and use it to build a good life." They did. The money went toward their house down payment. They bought a small 2-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, started talking about having children, began building the life they'd always wanted. Sylvia served 3.5 years of her sentence. She was released on parole and moved into a halfway house in Brooklyn. The society woman was gone completely. Sylvia now wore plain clothes, no jewelry, no makeup. She worked at a thrift store making minimum wage. She took public transportation everywhere. She lived in a tiny studio apartment. It was a dramatic fall from the life she'd once led. About 6 months after her release, she reached out through a mutual family friend. She wanted to meet with Ella and Jason. Jason discussed it with Ella. "What do you think? Should we see her?" "That's your decision. She's your mother. But she hurt you. Badly. And you. She hurt you too. But if you want to try to rebuild some kind of relationship, I won't stop you." They agreed to one meeting. Public place. Limited time. Clear boundaries. They met at a diner. Neutral territory. Sylvia looked older. Prison had aged her. She looked tired, worn, humble. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly. "We're here to listen," Jason said. "That's all I can promise." "I understand. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. For everything. What I did was unforgivable." She looked at Ella. "I destroyed your credit. I forged your signature. I put you at risk for debts you didn't owe. And I did it all to maintain a lie about my success. I'm ashamed of who I was." "Why?" Ella asked. "Why did you do it?" "Because I was terrified of being ordinary, of being seen as a failure. My whole identity was wrapped up in appearing successful. And when the business started failing, I couldn't admit it. I kept lying and stealing and destroying other people to maintain the illusion. She paused. Prison gave me a lot of time to think about why I value appearances over integrity, about why I was willing to hurt my own family. I've been in therapy. I'm trying to understand myself better, to become someone different. Do you expect us to forgive you? Jason asked. No, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know I understand what I did was wrong, and I'm trying to be better. They talked for about an hour. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't healing. But it was a beginning, a start of something. Not the relationship they'd had. That was gone forever. But maybe, someday, something new. 2 years after Sylvia was released from prison, I was reviewing my old case files when I came across Ella's folder. I decided to reach out and see how she was doing. Ella responded immediately. She invited me to lunch. We met at a cafe in Manhattan. Ella looked different, healthier, happier, more confident than the terrified woman who'd first walked into my office years ago. "How are things?" I asked. "Really good, actually. Jason and I are expecting our first child in 3 months." "Congratulations! That's wonderful news." "Thank you. We're excited. Nervous, but excited." "How's your relationship with Sylvia?" Ella paused, considering her answer. "Complicated. We see her about once every 2 months. Always supervised, always in public. She's been respectful. She never asks for money. She takes responsibility when we talk about the past." "Do you trust her?" "No. I don't know if I ever will. But I've accepted that she's part of Jason's life, and therefore part of mine in some limited way." "That's mature of you." "I had a good therapist," Ella smiled. "She helped me understand that I don't have to forgive Sylvia to move forward with my life. That boundaries and distance can be healthy. That I can acknowledge Jason's desire for a relationship with his mother without sacrificing my own well-being. Those are important lessons. They are. But I learned something else, too. Something I wanted to thank you for." "What's that?" "You believed me. When I came to your office, terrified and confused, with this impossible story about my mother-in-law forging my signature, you didn't dismiss me. You didn't tell me it was probably a misunderstanding. You took me seriously. It was obvious you were telling the truth. Maybe to you, but other people didn't believe me at first. Even Jason had doubts initially. He couldn't imagine his mother would do something so terrible. But you believed me immediately, and you fought for me. That meant everything." I felt touched by her words. That's what lawyers are supposed to do, fight for their clients. Not all of them do, though. I've heard horror stories from other people about attorneys who took their money and did nothing, or who didn't really believe them. You were different. You were invested. Your case was important. What Sylvia did was serious. Of course I was invested. Still, thank you. We talked for another hour about her life, her work, her pregnancy plans, about the house she and Jason had bought, about how they'd used Roberto's gift to create stability. As we were leaving, Ella mentioned something that caught my attention. "You know, I've been thinking about starting a support group." "For what?" "For people who've been victims of financial fraud by family members. There are support groups for domestic violence, for addiction, for all sorts of things, but not for this specific situation. And it's more common than people realize." That's a great idea. I kept thinking about how alone I felt when this was happening, how ashamed I was, how I blamed myself for not seeing the signs. I want other people to know they're not alone. Have you moved forward with it? I'm starting small. An online forum first, then maybe in-person meetings in New York. I've connected with a few other victims through the legal system, people who went through similar situations. If you need any legal resources or advice, let me know. I'd be happy to help. Thank you. I'll take you up on that. 6 months later, Ella's support group was up and running. She called it Family Fraud Survivors. It started as an online forum, then expanded to monthly in-person meetings in Manhattan. I attended one of the early meetings as a guest speaker. About 20 people showed up. All of them had stories remarkably similar to Ella's. There was a man whose brother had stolen his identity to take out loans. A woman whose mother had opened credit cards in her name. A couple whose son had forged their signatures to refinance their house and then disappeared with the money. Every story was different in the details, but identical in the pattern. Trust, betrayal, financial devastation, family destruction, and shame. So much shame. I felt like I should have seen it coming, one woman said. Everyone kept asking me, "Didn't you notice? Didn't you suspect?" Like it was my fault for being trusting. Same, another person said. People treated me like I was stupid for letting my father have access to my documents. But he was my father. Why wouldn't I trust him? Ella nodded. That's exactly why I started this group. Because the shame and self-blame are almost as damaging as the financial crimes themselves. We need to remind each other, we're not stupid, we're not naive. We were victimized by people who exploited our trust. The meeting was powerful. People shared their stories, they cried together, they supported each other, and they shared practical advice about credit repair, legal options, emotional healing. After the meeting, several people approached me with questions about their legal situations. I ended up taking on 2 new cases directly from that meeting, both involving family member fraud. The work continued. Over the next year, I handled a dozen more cases similar to Ella's. Not all as dramatic, not all involving as much money, but each one important to the victim. I represented a father whose daughter had forged his signature to take out student loans, a sister whose brother used her identity to open business accounts, an elderly woman whose caregiver had been slowly draining her bank account. Each case reinforced the patterns I'd seen in Ella's situation. Family fraud is uniquely devastating because it destroys relationships along with finances. The money can be recovered, credit can be repaired, but the trust, the family bond, that's often gone forever. I also noticed that many victims hesitated to report the crimes because of family pressure. But he's your son. Don't ruin his life over money. She's your sister. Can't you just work it out privately? Think about how this will look. What will people say? The pressure to protect the abuser and preserve family harmony often meant the victim suffered in silence. That's why Ella's support group was so important. It gave victims permission to prioritize their own well-being, to press charges if necessary, to set boundaries, to refuse to be sacrificed for the sake of family appearances. About 3 years after Sylvia was released from prison, she reached out to me directly. She wanted to meet. I was surprised, but agreed. We met at a coffee shop. Sylvia looked completely different from the woman I'd confronted in that conference room years ago. No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry. Simple jeans and a sweater. No makeup, hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said. "What can I do for you?" I wanted to apologize, to you, for the way I acted during the investigation and settlement. I was defensive and hostile. You were just doing your job, protecting Ella, but I treated you like an enemy. You were in a difficult situation. I created that difficult situation, and I made it worse by refusing to take responsibility. She paused. I've been thinking a lot about what I did, not just the crimes, but the mindset that led to them. What have you concluded? That I was living a lie. Everything about my life was a performance. The clothes, the car, the parties, the antique shop. None of it was real. I was so terrified of being seen as ordinary that I was willing to destroy people I loved to maintain the illusion. She looked directly at me. You know what the worst part is? The thing I'm most ashamed of? What? I blamed Ella. In my mind, I actually convinced myself she owed me,
That she should be grateful for being included in my success. That using her name wasn't really that bad because she was family. The mental gymnastics I performed to justify what I was doing were Olympic level. A lot of criminals justify their actions to themselves. I know, but understanding that doesn't make me feel better. I hurt people. Badly. And I need to live with that for the rest of my life. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been attending Ella's support group, anonymously, as a perpetrator, not a victim. There's a section for family members who committed fraud and are trying to understand why they did it. I was surprised. Ella knows you're there? Yes, she approved it, with the understanding that I never approach her directly, that I respect her boundaries completely. And what are you getting from the group? Understanding, accountability, a chance to hear from victims about the damage people like me cause. It's hard, really hard, but it's necessary. Are you hoping to fully reconcile with Ella and Jason? She shook her head. No. I don't think that's possible or even desirable. What I did was too damaging. But I hope that someday they can feel peace about what happened. That they don't carry the weight of my crimes anymore. That's a mature perspective. Prison gave me a lot of time to think. And therapy helped. I'm not the person I was. But I also can't undo what I did. So I'm trying to be better going forward. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop thinking about redemption and accountability. About whether people truly change or just learn to hide their true nature better. I didn't have an answer. Maybe both things are true. Maybe some people genuinely change. Maybe others just adapt. What I did know was this. Sylvia had faced real consequences. She'd lost everything. Her lifestyle, her home, her freedom, her relationship with her son. Those consequences seemed to have genuinely changed her. Would she have changed without them? Probably not. And that's why accountability matters, not just for punishment, but for transformation. 5 years after the case concluded, I attended Ella and Jason's daughter's second birthday party. They'd invited me as a gesture of gratitude for helping them through the crisis. It was a simple party in their backyard, kids running around, parents chatting, Ella and Jason looking happy and relaxed. At one point, Ella pulled me aside. I have some news. Sylvia asked if she could meet her granddaughter. Just once. Supervised. In a public place. What did you say? I said yes. Not for Sylvia's sake, but for my daughter's sake. Someday she'll ask about her grandmother. I want to be able to say I gave her the opportunity to have that relationship, even a limited one. That's generous of you. It's not generosity. It's boundaries with compassion. Sylvia gets to meet her granddaughter briefly, in a controlled environment. If she respects our boundaries, maybe occasional supervised visits continue. If she violates them, we cut contact completely. You've come a long way from the terrified woman who walked into my office. I had good help, and I learned something important. Being a victim doesn't mean being helpless. I fought back. I won. And that changed how I see myself. You should be proud. I am. Not of what happened, but of how I handled it.
I didn't let Sylvia's crimes define my life. I recovered. I moved forward. I built something good despite what she did. That's the real victory in cases like this. Not the legal outcome, though that matters, but the victim reclaiming their life, refusing to be defined by what was done to them, building something good from the wreckage. As I reflect on Ella's case now, years later, several lessons stand out. First, financial fraud within families is more common than people realize. It happens across all socioeconomic levels, all cultures, all types of families. Trust makes it possible, and shame keeps it hidden. Second, victims need support. Legal support, yes, but also emotional support. Validation that what happened wasn't their fault. Permission to set boundaries and pursue justice even when family pressure says otherwise. Third, accountability matters. Sylvia faced real consequences: prison time, financial devastation, loss of relationships. Those consequences may have genuinely changed her. Without them, she'd probably still be committing fraud. Fourth, recovery is possible. Ella rebuilt her credit, her finances, and her life. She went from victim to survivor to advocate. That transformation is inspiring. And finally, justice isn't always neat. Families don't fully heal from betrayals this deep, but there can be movement toward peace. Boundaries that protect everyone. Slow, careful rebuilding of something new. I still practice law. I still take fraud cases. And I still tell Ella's story, with her permission, to every client who comes to me terrorized by a family member's financial crimes. Because victims need to know. You can fight back. You can win. You can recover. And you deserve justice, even when the perpetrator is family. 7 years after Ella first walked into my office, I received an invitation to speak at a legal conference. The topic? Financial fraud by family members and how to protect victims. The conference was in Chicago. About 200 attorneys attended my presentation. I told Ella's story, with her permission, as a case study. After my presentation, I was approached by at least 30 attorneys who had similar cases. They wanted advice on handling family fraud situations, on balancing the legal issues with the emotional complexity, on protecting victims who are torn between seeking justice and preserving family relationships. The conversations continued long after the conference ended. I started getting emails from attorneys across the country asking for guidance on cases similar to Ella's. I realized this was a larger problem than I'd understood. Family financial fraud was epidemic, but there were few resources for attorneys handling these cases, few legal precedents, few support systems for victims. So I did something I'd been considering for a while. I started writing a legal guide, a comprehensive manual for attorneys handling family fraud cases, including legal strategies, psychological considerations, victim support resources, and case studies. The guide took me 8 months to write. When I finished, I sent a copy to Ella. She called me the next day. "You dedicated the book to me? You were my inspiration. Your case taught me so much about handling these situations with both legal rigor and emotional sensitivity. I don't know what to say. Say you're proud of yourself, because you should be." The guide was published through a legal education company. It became required reading for several law school classes on fraud and family law. Attorneys started using it as a reference for their own cases. And something unexpected happened. Victims started reading it too. People who were experiencing family fraud found the guide online or heard about it from their attorneys. They read it to understand the legal process, to know what to expect, to feel less alone. I started getting emails from victims thanking me for the guide, for validating their experiences, for explaining that what happened to them was serious and criminal, not just a family dispute. One woman wrote, "My brother stole $80,000 from me, and my family kept telling me to just let it go because he was struggling. Your guide helped me understand I had the right to press charges. I did, and he was convicted. Thank you for giving me permission to protect myself." Another person wrote, "Reading about Ella's case made me feel less alone. I thought I was the only person whose mother-in-law forged their signature. Knowing others have gone through this and survived gave me hope. The ripple effect was real. Ella's willingness to let me share her story was helping people across the country. Meanwhile, Ella's support group, Family Fraud Survivors, had grown significantly. What started as a small monthly meeting in Manhattan had expanded to chapters in 5 cities. There was an active online community with over 500 members. Ella had become an advocate. She spoke at conferences. She did interviews with financial news outlets about the warning signs of family fraud. She consulted with legislators about laws to protect victims. And she did all of this while working full-time as a graphic designer and raising her daughter. "How do you find the time?" I asked her during one of our occasional check-ins. "I make time because it matters. When I was going through this, I felt so alone. I felt ashamed. I blamed myself. If I can prevent even one person from feeling that way, it's worth it. You've helped more than one person. I know, and that's what keeps me going." About 8 years after the original case concluded, something remarkable happened. Roberto contacted me from Spain. "I wanted to update you on something," he said. "I've been working with financial regulators in both Spain and the United States on new protocols for business loans." "What kind of protocols?" "Requirements for verifying co-signer's identity and consent. When someone applies for a business loan with a co-signer, banks will now be required to contact that co-signer directly through verified contact information to confirm they understand and agree to the obligation. That would have prevented Sylvia's fraud." Exactly. If the bank had called Ella directly to confirm, the forgery would have been discovered immediately. I've been advocating for these protocols to honor my father's memory and to prevent other victims. That's remarkable, Roberto. I also wanted to tell you that I've established a victim compensation fund. Part of the proceeds from selling the antique shop business went into this fund. It provides financial assistance to victims of family fraud who can't afford legal representation. I was moved. Roberto, that's incredibly generous. It's necessary. Justice shouldn't only be available to people who can afford attorneys. You took Ella's case on contingency, but not every victim finds a lawyer willing to do that. This fund helps cover legal costs for those who need it. Can I refer potential clients to the fund? Please do. That's exactly why it exists. Over the next few years, I referred at least a dozen clients to Roberto's Victim Compensation Fund. People who'd been defrauded by family members but couldn't afford legal representation. The fund paid their legal costs and justice was served. The ripple effect continued expanding. 9 years after Ella's case, I was contacted by a television producer. They wanted to do a documentary about family financial fraud. They wanted to feature Ella's story. I connected them with Ella. She was hesitant at first. "I've moved on with my life," she told me. "Do I really want to relive all of this publicly?" "That's entirely your decision. But think about the reach. A documentary could educate millions of people about the warning signs, could help thousands of victims realize they're not alone. What about my daughter? She'll see this someday. I don't want her growing up with this story defining our family." You could frame it differently, not as something that defines you, but as something you survived, as an example of strength and recovery. Ella thought about it for several weeks. Finally, she agreed to participate, with conditions. The documentary would focus on recovery and advocacy, not just the crime. It would include resources for victims, And it would emphasize that family fraud is a systemic issue, not just individual cases. The documentary, titled Forged Trust: When Family Steals Your Identity, aired on a major streaming platform. It featured Ella's story prominently, but also included several other cases. It explained the legal issues, the psychological impact, and the resources available to victims. The response was overwhelming. The documentary was watched by millions of people. News outlets covered it. Social media discussions exploded. And most importantly, victims started coming forward. Ella's support group website crashed from the traffic in the first week after the documentary aired. Thousands of people joined the online community. Hundreds of new victims reached out for help. The documentary also sparked legislative action. Several states introduced bills to strengthen protections against identity theft by family members, to require more verification before someone could be added as a cosigner, to create streamlined processes for victims to clear fraudulent debt. I never imagined it would have this kind of impact, Ella told me after the documentary aired. You gave people permission to speak up, to admit what happened to them, to seek justice.
That's powerful. I just wanted to help a few people feel less alone. You've helped thousands, maybe more. 10 years after Ella first walked into my office, we met for coffee to reflect on everything that had happened. Ella looked healthy and content. Her daughter was now 7 years old. Jason had gotten a promotion. They'd bought a larger house. Life was good. How's your relationship with Sylvia now? I asked. Still complicated. We see her about 4 times a year, always supervised. She's good with our daughter, actually. Very gentle and respectful. She never oversteps. Do you trust her? No, I don't think I ever will. But I've accepted that this is what our relationship is now. Distant, but civil. For Jason's sake and for our daughter's sake. Has she stayed on the right path? As far as we know, she still works at the thrift store, still lives modestly, still attends therapy and support groups. She seems genuinely changed, but I remain cautious. That's wise. You know what's interesting? Our daughter asked me recently why Grandma Sylvia doesn't come to our house, why we only see her at restaurants. What did you tell her? I told her the truth, in age-appropriate terms. That Grandma made some bad choices years ago that hurt people. That we still love her, but we need to be careful. That grown-ups sometimes need boundaries to stay safe. How did she respond? She said, like how I have boundaries with kids who aren't nice at school? And I said yes, exactly like that. She seemed to accept it. You're teaching her important lessons about boundaries and self-protection. I hope so. I want her to grow up understanding that loving someone doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior, that you can care about people while still protecting yourself. We talked for another hour about life, work, and the unexpected journey that had brought us to this point. As I walked back to my office after our meeting, I reflected on the case and everything that had come from it. Ella's case had started as one victim's desperate cry for help. It had expanded into a legal battle that changed one woman's life. But the ripples had spread far beyond that. The case had led to a support group that helped thousands of victims, a legal guide that educated attorneys across the country, a victim compensation fund that provided access to justice, legislative changes that protected future victims, a documentary that raised awareness for millions. And through it all, Ella had transformed from a terrified victim into a powerful advocate. That's the real measure of justice, not just the verdict or the sentence, but the change that radiates outward, the victims who are helped, the crimes that are prevented, the awareness that is raised. I still practice law. I still take fraud cases. And I still think about Ella every time a new client walks into my office with a story of family betrayal. Because Ella taught me something crucial. Victims have power. They can fight back. They can win.
and they can transform their pain into purpose. To anyone reading this who has experienced family financial fraud, you are not alone. You are not stupid. You are not to blame. What happened to you was a crime. You have the right to seek justice. You have the right to press charges, even if the perpetrator is family. You have the right to protect yourself and rebuild your life. Resources exist. Support groups exist. Attorneys who understand these cases exist. Fight back. Seek help. Reclaim your life. And remember Ella's story. Remember that recovery is possible. That justice can be served. That you can survive and even thrive after family betrayal. The path forward isn't easy. It's painful and complicated. But it's possible. And you deserve justice. 10 years after my case concluded, my attorney asked if I'd write something for people who are going through what I experienced. Here's what I want you to know. When this happened to me, I felt like my world was ending. I was terrified, ashamed, confused. I blamed myself for trusting my mother-in-law. I felt stupid for not seeing the warning signs. But here's what I learned. I wasn't stupid. I was human. I trusted family because that's what we're supposed to do. The betrayal wasn't my fault. It was hers. If you're going through something similar right now, please know you are not alone. Thousands of people experience family financial fraud every year. It's more common than you think. You are not to blame. The person who committed fraud is responsible, not you. You have options. Legal recourse exists. You can fight back. You can win. Recovery is possible. I rebuilt my credit, my finances, and my life. You can too. It's okay to set boundaries. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting their abuse. You can care about family while still protecting yourself. Seeking justice isn't betrayal. Pressing charges against a family member is hard, but it's not wrong. They committed a crime. They need to face consequences. Time helps. The pain lessens. The anger fades. Life moves forward. My relationship with my mother-in-law will never be what it was. That version of our family is gone. But I've built something new, something honest, something that works for me and protects my well-being. I have a beautiful daughter, a wonderful husband, a career I love, a life I'm proud of. Sylvia's crimes didn't destroy me. They changed me, yes, but they also made me stronger, more aware, more committed to helping others. If I can leave you with one message, it's this. Don't let someone else's crimes define your life. Fight for yourself, protect yourself, rebuild yourself. You deserve justice, you deserve peace, you deserve a good life, and you can have all of those things. Thank you for listening to this true story. If you found it valuable, please subscribe to our channel for more real legal cases and important lessons about protecting yourself from fraud. Share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing Ella's story. Remember, family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior. You always have the right to seek justice and protect yourself. Visit familyfraudsurvivors.org for resources and support if you're experiencing something similar.